In a small town in northern Italy back in 1765, a man in one family started acting strange. He stopped sleeping. Not the tossing and turning kind of stopped, actually stopped. Within a few months, he was dead. For 2 centuries, his descendants thought it was a curse running through the family. It isn't a curse. It's a real disease, and it has a name. And what it does is take away the one thing your brain will not survive without. Sleep scientists call it fatal familial insomnia. It's caused by a single broken protein in the brain, and once it starts, it is always fatal. We'll come back to that family. Because to understand why losing sleep can actually kill a person, you first have to understand what sleep is doing every single night in a brain that isn't broken. In 1982, a physiologist named Alexander Borbely described it as 2 separate systems, running in parallel, fighting for control of your eyelids. He called it the 2-process model. The first process is the simple one. Every minute you're awake, a chemical called adenosine builds up in your brain. Picture sand falling into an hourglass. The longer you're awake, the more adenosine piles up, and the heavier your eyelids get. Scientists call this build-up sleep pressure. By the time you've been awake 16 hours, that pressure is doing most of the work of making you tired. Here's the part almost nobody thinks about. Coffee doesn't actually wake you up. Caffeine blocks adenosine from reaching its receptors. It doesn't clear the pressure, it just hides it from you. Which is why, hours later, when the caffeine wears off, all that hidden pressure lands on you at once. Caffeine's half-life runs about 3 to 5 hours. Drink a coffee at 3 in the afternoon, and by 9 at night, roughly half of it is still in your system, still parked on those receptors, still hiding some of that pressure. Genetics play a role too. Some people clear caffeine roughly twice as fast as others, based on a single gene controlling one liver enzyme, which is part of why one person's afternoon coffee is another person's 3 in the morning ceiling stare. A short nap works differently. It drains a little pressure off the top, the way opening a valve lets some steam out of the hourglass without emptying it. That's part of why a 20-minute nap can help, and a 3-hour one can leave you groggier than before it. Too much pressure let out, too early. That's process 1. Pressure, quietly building, whether you're paying attention to it or not. But pressure alone can't explain why you get sleepy at 10 at night and not at 10 in the morning. For that, you need the second process. Process C is a literal clock, running inside a cluster of brain cells about the size of a grain of rice. It's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Supra means above, and it sits just above the optic chiasm, the spot where the 2 optic nerves cross, right behind your eyes. It runs on a roughly 24-hour loop, whether or not you ever see daylight. Every morning, light hits your retina and resets that clock. Every night, once the light fades, that same clock signals a gland deep in your brain to start releasing melatonin. 2 systems running in parallel. One counting how long you've been awake, the other tracking what time it actually is. Most nights, the 2 agree, and you fall asleep right on schedule. Fly across 6 time zones, though, and they fall out of sync. Your pressure system says sleep. Your clock says it's the middle of the afternoon. That disagreement is what jet lag actually is. The suprachiasmatic nucleus wasn't confirmed as the master clock until the 1970s, when researchers removed it in lab animals and watched their sleep-wake rhythm collapse into randomness, with nothing left to hold the pattern together. Even people who are completely blind, with no light perception at all, usually keep something close to a working clock. A separate set of light-sensing cells in the retina, cells with nothing to do with actual vision, still send that same reset signal straight to the SCN. Shift workers live the mismatch on purpose. Work through the night, sleep through the day, and process C keeps insisting it's the wrong time anyway. There's no negotiating with a 24-hour clock that isn't taking instructions from anyone's calendar. So the 2 systems agree, and you go under. What happens next isn't one long blackout. It's a structured, repeating cycle, about 90 minutes long, and most adults run through 4 to 6 of them a night. Picture a staircase, going down, then back up, over and over until morning. Each 90-minute cycle has stages built into it. Light sleep first, called N1 and N2, where a quiet sound could still wake you. Then N3, the deep stage, where the real work happens. Early in each cycle, you drop into that deep N3 stage. Brain waves slow down. Your body goes almost still. And this is where your brain does something you'd probably never guess. It cleans itself. There's a plumbing system inside the brain called the glymphatic system. A team of neuroscientists led by Maiken Nedergaard found that it opens up during deep sleep, flushing out the metabolic waste that built up over the day. The space between brain cells actually expands, and fluid washes through, carrying that waste out. In their studies on mice, cleanup nearly doubled during sleep. Human evidence is still arriving, but it's pointing the same direction. Deep sleep is also when your brain replays the day. Researchers have watched it happen in real time. The same neural patterns that fired while you were learning something, firing again, hours later, at high speed while you sleep. Your hippocampus is handing memories off to more permanent storage in your cortex, like a librarian moving books from a returns cart onto the permanent shelves. Later in the cycle, the staircase flips, and you climb back up into REM sleep, the stage where your eyes dart back and forth and most of your dreaming happens. Early in the night, N3 dominates each cycle. By the later cycles, that balance flips, N3 shrinks, and REM stretches out longer and longer, which is part of why the most vivid dreaming tends to land right before you wake up, not right after you fall asleep. REM does something different. It turns down the volume on your amygdala, the part of your brain that handles fear and threat. Researchers have shown this directly. Show someone something emotionally difficult, let them sleep on it, and the next day, that same memory triggers less of a fear response. Skip the REM sleep, and the emotional sting stays just as sharp as it was. Sleep scientist Matthew Walker called it overnight therapy. You process the feeling. The facts stay intact. So that's the machine, running properly. Here's what happens when it doesn't. In 1964, a 17-year-old named Randy Gardner decided to break the world record for staying awake for a school science fair project. He made it 11 days, 264 hours. No caffeine, monitored the whole way by a Stanford researcher named William Dement. By day 4, Gardner was struggling to focus his eyes. By day 7, he was hallucinating and briefly convinced he was a famous football player. He recovered, he slept, and within a couple of days he was mostly back to normal. Guinness World Records has since stopped recognizing attempts to break his number on safety grounds. There's an official record for going without sleep, and right now, nobody is allowed to chase it. But the closer researchers looked at cases like his, the worse the picture got. Stay awake 17 hours straight, and your reaction time and judgment look about the same as someone at the legal blood alcohol limit for driving. Push past 24 hours, and you're functioning like someone twice over that limit. That comparison comes from a study published in Nature in 1997 by researchers Drew Dawson and Catherine Reed, who ran sleep-deprived volunteers through the same reaction time tests used on drinking drivers and lined the two curves up directly. Most people would never hand someone the car keys in that state. Plenty of people do it to themselves anyway and just call it a long day. Which brings us back to that family in Italy. Fatal familial insomnia comes from a single mutated gene passed down through a family line. The broken protein it produces is a prion, the same category of misfolded protein behind mad cow disease. It slowly destroys the thalamus, the relay station that helps route the signals between your two sleep systems. Once symptoms start, most patients survive somewhere around 18 months. As it degrades, process S and process C stop being able to talk to each other. Patients lose the ability to reach deep sleep at all. Then they lose sleep entirely at every stage. The disease is rare. Only a small number of families in the world carry it. But researchers have used it carefully to map exactly how much of the brain sleep actually depends on. Because when that connection breaks completely, sleep doesn't get harder to reach. It becomes impossible. And a body doesn't last very long without it. So here's what's actually happening. Every single night, whether you notice it or not, two systems keep score. One counts the hours since you last slept. The other tracks the position of the sun. When they agree, you go under, and your brain runs a maintenance routine almost nobody consciously witnesses, flushing waste, filing memories, taking some of the sharp edge off yesterday's feelings. It isn't one mechanism. It's an entire operation, running on a schedule, every night of your life, without ever asking your permission. Sleep researchers, pooling decades of this kind of data, eventually landed on a rough range for most adults, something like 7 to 9 hours a night for that whole operation to run properly, start to finish. You'll spend something like a third of your life doing this, unconscious, on your back, running a process this complicated and this coordinated, and you won't remember a single second of it. That family in the Italian village didn't know any of this back in 1765. They just knew something in them had stopped working, and eventually, it took their lives. Tonight, somewhere behind your closed eyes, that same two-part system runs right on schedule. The clock ticks, the pressure builds, and somewhere around 90 minutes in, your brain starts doing work you'll never remember asking it to do. What do you think it's working on tonight?